The period that we currently find ourselves in is in fact described in this week's Parsha, the Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, where the Torah tells us that between the festivals of Pesach and Shavuot, we are to count up to 50 days. On the 50th day is when a new sacrifice is to be brought. On the 50th day is when the Jewish people got the Torah. And the Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, is really a very exciting time. The Midrash tells us that even before the Torah was given, the Jewish people were counting from the moment they left Pesach. They were counting the days until eventually they would receive the Torah at Mount Sinai. Of course, the Sfirat HaOmer can also be a challenging time and a difficult time and a spiritually ambiguous time. We find that although it is a time of incredible joy in the anticipation of receiving the Torah, but historically many tragedies happened, including the death of the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, many of the terrible pogroms of the Crusade, and therefore it's a time that Jewish people have to concentrate on their spiritual growth. And that is why during the days of the Omer, there are those who have a custom to learn and to concentrate on the words of the 6th chapter of Pirkei Avot. The 6th chapter of Pirkei Avot, which in fact is not taken from the Mishnah, but is a part of the oral law, which is outside of the Mishnah, speaks about how one can go about acquiring the Torah, to become a Torah scholar. And one Mishnah in particular is very famous. And it tells us that if one is a king, that there were certain attributes, there were certain promises, and there were certain privileges. There were 30 privileges of being a king. When it came to a Kohen, there were 24 attributes that were required, or there were 24 gifts that the Kohen would receive. But, says the teaching in Pirkei Avot, Torah is greater than the monarchy, Torah is greater than the priesthood, because it requires 48 prerequisites before a person can become a Torah scholar. And it goes on to list what all of these 48 particular attributes are. So there were those who would concentrate each day of the Omer on a particular attribute of the 48. That would take up 48 days of the Omer, and then the 49th day, the day before Shavuot, was a time to look at it from a more global perspective, to put all 48 characteristics into a macro lens and to try and integrate them into one's personality. Let's just look for the time being at 3 attributes that are mentioned in that particular teacher, and they are connected to one another. So Pirkei Avot tells us in the 6th chapter that in order to acquire the Torah, there are 3 types of relationships that are essential. And this is the way that it puts it. Number 1, shimush chachamim, to serve the wise people. Number 2, dikduk chaverim, to be precise, to be close, to discuss things with one's colleagues, with one's friends. And lastly, pilpul chaverim, which means to debate and to discuss with one's students. So we find that when it comes to studying Torah, that there are these 3 essential relationships. Number 1, chachamim, the wise, the scholars, the rabbis. One has to find a rabbi that one learns most of one's wisdom from. And here, the teaching, the Mishnah tells us, and it uses a very precise verb, shimush chachamim. You must serve them. It's not enough just to learn from them in a classroom setting, but you should spend time with wise people. You should watch how they function. You should watch from what they do in practice. Because in life, a lot of what's learned is not learned in the classroom, but it's learned, as it were, in the battlefield. And there was always the concept of apprenticeship, that a young rabbi, a young Talmudic scholar would be apprenticed to an older scholar and would watch them in practice. How did they officiate, for example, at a funeral, or the opposite at a wedding, or perhaps in some type of a matter, legal matter in the Beis Din. And they would pick up from their conversation and from their dealings how to apply Torah to life. So the one essential relationship is to have a relationship with a teacher. Number 2, it says dikduk chaverim. You have to learn with friends. The Talmud absolutely requires that when you learn Torah, that you should learn it bechavruta. That means with another person. You don't stay in your study, lock yourself in and learn by yourself. There's time for that. There's place for that. But Torah is always learned together with a friend. You can bounce things off him. Perhaps you think you are correct and you put forward what your belief is, and then he brings a proof to show you that your belief is not correct. And you have this relationship. Here, the Mishnah uses the word dikduk chavem, which means to be precise. You don't have to necessarily be precise with your teacher. He has learnt all of the information and he imparts it to you. But when you're discussing something with your friend, it's merely a suggestion, and therefore you have to be more particular. And then there's a third level, and that is your talmidim, your students, those who are below you. And it's interesting that the Rambam Maimonides writes that the mitzvah of learning Torah is not just to learn it, but to teach it. If you don't give it over, you have not, in fact, fulfilled the mitzvah of studying Torah. And it's of great importance and benefit to have students, because the students, if you teach them properly and adequately, are going to ask you questions, and they're going to ask you difficult questions. They're going to hone your mind. Or the way that the Talmud teaches it, it says that the students are like a little match, and the teacher is like a big piece of wood. All it takes is that little match to ignite the big piece of wood. And this is related to a beautiful, beautiful statement in the Talmud, where a great rabbi said, I've learned a lot from my teachers. I've learned even more from my peers, but I have learned the most from my students. So in order to become a Torah scholar, you don't just go sit on a mountain, seclude yourself away in your study. You have to have a teacher. You have to have colleagues, and you have to have students. And these are just 3 of the 48 absolutely essential qualities that are needed to acquire the Torah. I hope that we can reach Shavuot with a different level of growth, and that we can once again receive the Torah. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.